Galactic peace negotiations collapsed because one human stood up and walked away, reaches its dramatic peak when Elena overrides the station's translation system to broadcast damning evidence of corporations profiting from manufactured conflicts. In the stunned silence that follows, she removes her Earth insignia, denounces the theater of lies, and walks out. A single act of defiance that shatters centuries of orchestrated deception. Elena Park's stomach churned as Nexus Unity Station came into view through the transport shuttle's viewport. The massive ring-and-spoke structure hung in the blackness of contested space, like an enormous mechanical flower, its 12 arms extending outward from the central hub in perfect symmetry. Each arm represented one of the major species participating in what historians had euphemistically termed the era of quiet wars. Centuries of small-scale skirmishes, trade embargoes, and espionage that never quite erupted into full-scale conflict, but never truly allowed for peace. "First time at a summit?" Commander Raoul Thane asked, his weathered face betraying little emotion. The veteran Martian military aide had been assigned to her for the duration of the mission, ostensibly as security. But Elena suspected he was there to ensure Earth's interests were properly represented. "First time as lead negotiator," Elena replied, adjusting the collar of her formal diplomatic attire. "I've studied the last 17 summits extensively, including all the transcripts." Thane's expression darkened. "Those won't tell you the real story." Elena chose not to respond as their shuttle docked at the Earth arm of the station. At 38, Dr. Elena Park had spent her career as an anthropologist specializing in interspecies communication. Her appointment as Earth's primary envoy had raised eyebrows in diplomatic circles. She was neither a career diplomat nor a military strategist. But her unique background in cross-cultural mediation had convinced Earth Command she might succeed where traditional negotiators had failed. The airlock hissed open, revealing a delegation waiting to receive them. To Elena's surprise, the first to approach was not a human representative, but a shimmering, translucent figure that seemed to dance like smoke within a containment field. Ambassador Zovi of the Whisper Collective. "Dr. Park," the gaseous being pulsed with light as it spoke, its translator rendering the visual language into audio. "Your reputation precedes you. We of the Collective are most eager to observe your mediation techniques." "Ambassador Zovi." Elena bowed slightly, careful to maintain the proper distance from the containment field. "I'm honored by your welcome. The Collective's insights will be invaluable to our proceedings." As they moved through the reception area, Elena was struck by the magnificent scale of the station's interior. Soaring ceilings arched overhead, designed to accommodate species of vastly different heights and atmospheric requirements. Fountains of recycled water created ambient sound that masked the constant hum of life support systems. It was beautiful, awe-inspiring, and yet, as delegates from different species passed one another in the corridors, the undercurrent of tension was palpable. Whispered conversations halted. Eyes, sensory appendages, and other perceptive organs tracked potential threats. Commander Thane leaned close. "You see it already, don't you? The summit hasn't even begun, and everyone's measuring everyone else for a coffin." "That's why we're here," Elena said firmly. "To change the pattern." They were escorted to their quarters in the Earth arm, spacious accommodations with views of the station's central hub. As the attendants left, Elena caught fragments of a hushed conversation from the corridor outside. "Maintenance Corridor 6. Unauthorized meeting. A Centauri delegation involved. Corporate liaisons must not know." When she stepped into the corridor to investigate, the speakers had already disappeared around a bend. Commander Thane appeared at her shoulder. "Eavesdropping already, Dr. Park?" His tone was half amused, half warning. "Just getting acquainted with the station dynamics," she replied smoothly. "We should prepare for tomorrow's opening session." That night, as Elena reviewed her notes, her personal communicator chimed with an encrypted message from Earth Command. Secure Martian timber rights by any means. Earth Industries, Priority Alpha. She stared at the message for a long moment before deleting it. The irony wasn't lost on her. Sent to negotiate peace while carrying secret orders that could undermine it. This was her first test of loyalties, and certainly not the last. The central amphitheater of Nexus Unity Station was an architectural marvel. A perfect circle with 12 equal sections, one for each major species delegation. The ceiling was a transparent dome, showing the stars beyond, a reminder of what united them all. Elena took her seat at the Earth section, noting that each delegation was physically separated from the others by subtle environmental barriers, different atmospheric mixtures, gravity settings, and temperature controls. Commander Thane sat behind her, along with Earth's technical advisors and translator specialists, though all official proceedings would be processed through the station's central translation system, a sophisticated AI that had been jointly programmed by all 12 species. The station's neutral administrator, a silicon-based entity, from a species that had deliberately removed itself from territorial disputes, called the session to order. One by one, each delegation delivered its opening statement. Elena listened carefully, taking notes by hand rather than relying solely on digital records. By the fourth statement, she noticed something peculiar, phrases that seemed to echo across species boundaries, repeated with almost uncanny precision. By the ninth statement, she was certain. These weren't merely similar diplomatic platitudes. These were virtually identical scripts, as if each delegation had been given the same template, with only minor cultural adaptations. When it was Earth's turn, Elena delivered the prepared statement she'd been given, aware now that she was participating in what appeared to be an elaborate charade. As she spoke the words about Earth's commitment to lasting peace and the necessity of equitable resource distribution, she wondered how many times these exact sentiments had been expressed in this very chamber, only to be followed by another year of quiet hostilities. After the session, Commander Thane found her in the Earth delegation's private conference room. "You noticed it," he said. "It wasn't a question." The statements were practically identical, Elena confirmed. They matched previous summit transcripts almost word for word in some sections. Thane nodded grimly. "It's a dance. Everyone knows the steps. No one dares to change the choreography." "Because no one actually wants peace?" Elena challenged. "Because no one believes it's possible," Thane countered. "After centuries of quiet war, peace has become a theoretical concept, something to discuss, not achieve." Elena was about to respond when her station terminal chimed. An anonymous message had been delivered. No sender information, no metadata. Just a simple file attachment that, when opened, revealed a heavily encrypted data package. It took her personal decryption algorithms nearly an hour to crack it. What emerged made her blood run cold. Financial logs showing multi-species corporations funding both sides of every major incident reported in the past decade. Arms shipments to both attackers and defenders. Insurance payments that somehow preceded catastrophic accidents. Supply chain disruptions that coincided precisely with negotiation breakthroughs. Someone had sent her proof that the era of quiet wars was being deliberately perpetuated and profited from. "Commander," she called, her voice tight. "I think you need to see this." The next 3 days passed in a blur of formal negotiations by day and clandestine investigation by night. Elena and Thane meticulously cataloged the timestamps of each debate point raised in session, then cross-referenced them with the shipping records and financial transactions from the mysterious data drop. The pattern was undeniable. Whenever serious progress toward resolution seemed imminent, a perfectly timed incident would erupt in some distant sector, inflaming tensions and derailing talks. What was more disturbing was how these incidents correlated with massive financial transactions through corporate intermediaries with ties to multiple species. "We need to know who's behind this," Elena insisted, as they pored over the data in her quarters during the station's artificial night cycle. These aren't coincidences. You're playing with fire, Thane warned. Earth Command won't thank you for this investigation. Earth Command ordered me to secure Martian timber rights, Elena shot back. How can I do that if I don't understand the true dynamics at play? Thane's expression hardened. Earth must choose a side, Dr. Park. Either we align with the stronger blocks and secure our interests, or we'll be sidelined entirely. This isn't about discovering universal truth. It's about survival. Survival at what cost? Elena demanded. Perpetual conflict? Manipulation by unseen corporate interests? Their argument was interrupted by a station-wide alert. A Helian research vessel had reportedly been attacked in a nearby sector. Emergency protocols were being activated. The summit would pause for security assessment. Elena and Thane rushed to the central monitoring hub, where delegates from all species were gathering to view incoming data. Sirens wailed. Emergency lighting bathed the corridors in pulsing red, and panic was evident in the voices and movements of various delegates. But something didn't add up. Elena noticed that certain delegates, particularly those from military and security backgrounds, seemed almost prepared for the news. Their responses were too measured, too coordinated. This is staged, she whispered to Thane. Look at the Zenthari delegation. They're already prepared with a response statement. How could they have drafted that so quickly? Before Thane could answer, they were separated by a surge of delegates rushing to contact their home governments. Elena found herself pushed toward a maintenance corridor, one of the areas mentioned in the whispered conversation she'd overheard on her first day. Making a split-second decision, she slipped through the access door and found herself in a dimly lit service tunnel. Voices echoed from around a bend. Elena moved silently forward, her training in field research serving her well as she positioned herself to observe without being seen. In a small junction where several maintenance corridors met, representatives from what appeared to be neutral observer organizations, corporate liaisons, humanitarian groups, and scientific delegations were engaged in hushed but intense conversation. Among them, she recognized executives from Galactic Resource Development and Universal Defense Systems, two of the largest multi-species corporations mentioned in the encrypted data. The Helian incident is proceeding according to schedule, a tall, reptilian figure was saying. Markets are already responding. The defense appropriations will be approved within hours. And the summit, asked another figure, humanoid but clearly augmented with technological enhancements. Delayed by at least 72 hours. Enough time to move the shipments through Sector 9. Elena had heard enough. She retreated silently and made her way back to the main corridors, her mind racing. The attack on the Helian vessel wasn't just staged. It was part of an elaborate scheme to manipulate markets, divert attention, and ensure the summit remained locked in its ritual dance of pretend diplomacy. Back in her quarters, Elena found herself in a moral crisis, unlike any she'd faced before. The evidence was clear. A conspiracy, spanning multiple species, corporations, and governments was deliberately perpetuating conflict for profit. But what could she, a single human envoy, do about it? Earth Command had been explicit in their orders. Expose this conspiracy, and she would likely be recalled, perhaps even accused of diplomatic sabotage. Remain silent, play the game, and she might secure the timber rights Earth supposedly needed, all while becoming complicit in a system that thrived on manufactured suffering. Sleep eluded her. The station's artificial dawn found her still at her desk, surrounded by data projections and classified reports. A soft chime at her door roused her from her thoughts. Ambassador Zovi of the Whisper Collective hovered in the corridor, its containment field humming softly. Dr. Park, the gaseous being pulsed. May I enter? What I have to share should not be overheard. Elena admitted the ambassador, adjusting the room's environmental controls to accommodate the Whisper's needs. You are investigating the patterns, Sovai stated, more an observation than a question. You have noticed what many suspect, but few dare to acknowledge. You know about the corporate manipulation, Elena said, watching the swirling patterns within Sovai's gaseous form, the equivalent of body language for the Whisper Collective. 3 cycles ago, our energy farms in the Cygnus sector were sabotaged. Sovai's lights dimmed with what Elena recognized as grief. 23,000 consciousness streams were disrupted, what you might call deaths. The attack was attributed to Zenthari extremists. But it wasn't them, Elena guessed. No. We traced the weapons signatures to a subsidiary of Universal Defense Systems, the same corporation that then sold us enhanced security technology at premium rates. Sovai's form pulsed with indignation. Our species was nearly destroyed not by enemies, but by profit margins. After Sovai departed, Elena tried to process this new information. The Whisper Collective was known for its careful neutrality. For them to share such accusations meant the situation was even more serious than she'd imagined. Later that day, as Elena moved through the diplomatic reception area, a small insectoid figure brushed past her, a minor delegate from the Kriller hive. As they passed, she felt something slip into her pocket. Once alone, she discovered a tiny holoprojector containing evidence that the Krillers' agro-exports had been systematically sabotaged, creating artificial famines that justified military intervention in their sector. The anonymous Kriller delegate had taken an enormous risk. In their hierarchical society, such independent action could result in expulsion from the hive mind, a fate worse than death for their species. That evening, as the summit prepared to reconvene, following the all-clear from the Helion incident investigation, a final message arrived from Earth Command. Finalize alliance pledge by midnight or lose backing. Timber rights non-negotiable. Elena stared at her reflection in the viewport of her quarters. The woman who looked back at her seemed different from the one who had arrived at Nexus Unity Station just days ago, her eyes harder, her expression set with determination. What will you do? Thane asked from the doorway. He had entered silently, a skill from his military days. The only thing I can, Elena answered. The truth may not set us free, Commander, but lies certainly won't. They'll destroy you, he warned. Every delegation, every corporation, every government benefiting from this system, they'll all turn against you. Perhaps, Elena agreed. But can you live with the alternative? Endless, quiet wars that are anything but quiet for those caught in them. Thane was silent for a long moment. What do you need from me? He finally asked. Elena smiled grimly. Access to the central translation system and broadcast controls. The central amphitheater was filled to capacity when Elena arrived. The station administrator had just called the emergency session to order, ostensibly to address the Helion incident and its implications for the peace process. Elena waited as the first 3 delegations delivered their predictable statements of outrage and calls for investigation, all according to the script she now recognized so well. When Earth's turn came, she rose and approached the central podium. Fellow delegates, she began, following protocol. The attack on the Helion research vessel represents a serious escalation in our ongoing conflicts. So far, so expected. Delegates from various species shifted in their respective environments, some already preparing their responses to what they assumed would be another routine condemnation. However, Elena continued, her finger hovering over the small device Thane had given her. Before we proceed with our ritualized expressions of concern, I believe we should examine some relevant data. She pressed the device. Throughout the amphitheater, the translation system's holographic displays flickered, then transformed into visualization of the encrypted financial logs she had been studying. The station's AI, temporarily overridden, began narrating the data in all 12 major languages simultaneously. What you are seeing, Elena continued, raising her voice over the sudden commotion, is evidence of a systematic conspiracy to perpetuate what we euphemistically call the era of quiet wars. These logs show dual accounting of defensive weapons sold to both attackers and defenders in every major conflict of the past decade. The amphitheater erupted in chaos. Some delegates rose in outrage, others sat in stunned silence. Security personnel rushed toward the central controls, but Thane had positioned Earth's security team to delay them. These records also show subsidies provided by corporate consortia to stage skirmishes precisely when trade talks peaked. Elena continued relentlessly, including yesterday's attack on the Helion vessel, which, I should note, reported no actual casualties. The holograms shifted to show the complex web of financial transactions surrounding the Helion incident. Money flowing from corporate accounts to mercenary groups, then to insurance companies, and finally to defense contractors. "This is outrageous!" bellowed the Xanthari War Minister, his armored exoskeleton clattering as he rose. "Earth attempts to distract from its own complicity. Earth Command will disavow this presentation," Elena acknowledged calmly. "They may well recall me for this action, but I ask you all, how many more centuries of engineered conflict are we willing to endure? How many more lives sacrificed for profit margins?" The station administrator finally managed to override the broadcast. The holograms disappeared, replaced by the standard translation interface. But Elena had accomplished her goal. The evidence had been seen by every delegate in the amphitheater. In the silence that followed, Elena removed the Earth insignia from her formal attire and placed it on the podium. "I refuse to mediate in this theater of lies," she pronounced, her voice echoing in the stunned quiet. "If peace is to mean anything, we must first dismantle the profiteers who thrive on its absence." With those words, she turned and walked away from the podium, down the central aisle, and through the massive doors of the amphitheater. They closed behind her with a resonant clang that seemed to echo throughout the station. In the corridor outside, Elena leaned against the wall, suddenly aware of how rapidly her heart was beating. There was no going back now. She had violated direct orders, exposed classified information, and likely ended her diplomatic career, possibly even facing charges of treason upon return to Earth. She didn't have long to contemplate her actions. The amphitheater doors burst open, and delegates poured out in various states of agitation. Some stormed past her without acknowledgement, their translators broadcasting furious denunciations. Others moved in tight groups, security personnel forming protective formations around high-ranking officials. But something unexpected was happening as well. In corners and alcoves, delegates from traditionally hostile species were engaged in hushed, urgent conversations, without the usual buffer of translators and aides. A Hydran scientist conferred directly with a Xanthari engineer. A Kriller hive speaker vibrated communication patterns toward a fascinated Whisper Collective member. Commander Thane found her amidst the chaos. "Station Command has locked down the corporate liaison offices," he reported, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. "They're conducting forensic audits of all communication systems." "And Earth's reaction?" Elena asked, bracing herself. "About what you'd expect. Official recall. Disavowal of your actions. Claims that the evidence was fabricated." He handed her a secure communicator. "Evacuation shuttle is standing by in Docking Bay 7. Elena looked at the communicator, then back at the dispersing delegates, some leaving in fury, others forming impromptu discussion groups in the station's common areas. "I'm not leaving," she decided. "There's more work to be done here." "They'll come after you," Thane warned. "Earth, the corporations, maybe even some of the more militant delegations." "Then I'll need allies," Elena said. "And I believe I've just found some." Over the next hours, as the initial shock waves of her revelation reverberated through the station, Elena established a makeshift operations center in a neutral conference room. To her surprise, volunteers began to appear, a team of Martian engineers offering technical expertise. Terran hackers who had smuggled themselves onto the station as service personnel. Whisper collective archivists with access to centuries of transaction records. Even more surprising was the arrival of Commander Thane, who had removed his own military insignia. "Earth Command has officially relieved me of duty," he explained with a shrug. "Something about failing to prevent a diplomatic incident." "You knew this would happen," Elena observed. "I suspected," he smiled slightly. "After 20 years enforcing policies I questioned, I find I prefer integrity, even with its consequences." Together, they formed an independent inquiry team, operating outside official channels but with growing support from delegates disillusioned by the revelations. Their first priority was securing the evidence, creating backups of the financial logs, and distributing them to trusted individuals across multiple species. The station entered a period of unprecedented upheaval. Several delegations formally withdrew from the summit. Corporate representatives were detained or expelled. Security protocols were completely rewritten, with new oversight mechanisms implemented by a hastily assembled coalition of technical experts from diverse species. In the midst of this chaos, genuine dialogue began to emerge. Without the choreographed formalities of official sessions, delegates started addressing actual grievances rather than manufactured ones. Species that had been locked in resource disputes discovered opportunities for complementary development rather than competition. 3 months after what station personnel had taken to calling the walkout, Nexus Unity Station hosted the first meeting of the Transparent Council. No uniforms, no insignias, no formal delegations, just open tables where representatives from all species could engage directly. The station's central translation system had been reprogrammed to provide literal translations only, without the diplomatic, smoothing algorithms that had previously obscured meaning. Corporate war filtration agencies had been disbanded, their officers retrained as cross-species mediators, environmental engineers, and humanitarian liaisons. The massive profits previously funneled into manufactured conflicts were now directed toward restoration projects in sectors damaged by years of skirmishes. From her new office overlooking Earthrise, a small space allocated to her not as Earth's representative, but as an independent mediator, Elena composed a report for distribution to all 12 homeworlds. Peace built on truth is fragile, but it endures. One stand can shatter a lie, and the galaxy began to rebuild in its wake. We have disbanded the architects of conflict, but their ideology lives on in those who profited from division. Vigilance must be our constant companion as we construct new systems based on transparency rather than expedience. The path forward is neither simple nor assured. Ancient grievances, both real and manufactured, cannot be erased by a single revelation. But in acknowledging the forces that manipulated us all, we have created space for genuine reconciliation. I write this not as Earth's envoy, nor as the catalyst of change, but as one voice among many now committed to sustaining what we have begun. The era of quiet wars taught us that peace is not merely the absence of open conflict. It is the presence of justice, transparency, and mutual respect. We build this peace one conversation at a time, one treaty based on truth rather than convenience, one collaborative project that serves all our peoples. It is imperfect, as all created things must be, but it is real, and it is ours. As she finished the report, a notification appeared on her terminal, a message from Earth Command. They were sending a new official envoy to replace her, with orders to normalize relations and re-establish Earth's diplomatic presence. Reading between the lines, Elena understood that certain elements on Earth were already attempting to return to business as usual. Commander Thane entered without knocking, now a familiar presence in her daily work. "You've seen the notification?" he asked. "Yes," Elena confirmed. "Earth wants back in the game. The question is, which game?" Thane mused. The old one of manufactured conflicts, or the new one we're trying to create? That will depend on all of us, Elena said, rising from her desk to look out at the blue sphere of Earth. There are still those loyal to the old order, on Earth and every homeworld. They won't surrender power easily. No, Thane agreed, but they'll find it harder to operate in the light. A soft chime indicated the arrival of Ambassador Zovi, accompanied by representatives from 3 other species, each without formal insignia or ceremonial attire. The Transparent Council is ready to begin today's session, Zovi announced, lights pulsing with what Elena had come to recognize as cautious optimism. We are discussing the demilitarization of the Proxima trading routes. A topic that would have been unthinkable 3 months ago, remarked the Kriller delegate, the same one who had slipped Elena the evidence about agricultural sabotage. The insectoid, being now openly identified as Speaker Tricat, appointed by a reformed hive consensus. Unthinkable, but necessary, added a Xanthari representative, her exoskeleton bearing the marks of a scientist rather than a warrior. Preliminary studies indicate resource sharing would benefit all our systems. Elena gathered her notes and joined the group moving toward the council chambers. As they walked, she reflected on how far they had come, and how far they still had to go. The corporations that had profited from conflict were weakened, but not destroyed. The military-industrial complexes of 12 worlds were diminished, but not dismantled. And the habit of suspicion, ingrained over centuries, could not be erased in a single season. But for the first time in generations, species that had known only quiet war were experiencing the tentative first steps of genuine peace. Not the artificial calm between orchestrated conflicts, but the challenging, uncomfortable, rewarding work of building understanding. As they entered the council chamber, once the formal amphitheater, now reconfigured with a single round table at its center, Elena caught Thane's eye. The former commander gave her a slight nod, acknowledging what they both knew. This fragile peace would face countless tests in the years to come. There would be setbacks, perhaps even failures. The profiteers would attempt to reassert their influence. Ancient prejudices would resurface in moments of crisis. But something fundamental had changed when Elena stood up and walked away from the theater of lies. The spell had been broken, the script discarded. Whatever came next would be written not by hidden manipulators, but by those willing to stand in the light of truth, however uncomfortable that light might be. Elena took her seat at the round table, alongside representatives of species that had been enemies for centuries. Before them lay the challenging work of dismantling barriers, addressing genuine grievances, and creating systems resistant to manipulation. It would require courage, persistence, and unflinching honesty. But as the council called itself to order, without ceremony, without artificial hierarchy, Elena felt something she hadn't expected to find at Nexus Unity Station. Hope. Not the naive optimism of one unfamiliar with conflict, but the tested hope of someone who had seen through deception to the possibility beyond. One human had stood up and walked away from a lie, and in that action, created space for truth to take root and grow. "Let us begin," said the station administrator, no longer a neutral overseer, but an active participant in creation. "Today, we build another piece of the peace we all deserve." And they did,